Nanalo ng Foundfeed na Team Tira 2,000 pesos.
Family Feud, 5:40 p.m.
Welcome to my episode that is called
Nagmamano pa.
That's okay.
Japanese voters have delivered a landslide victory to Sanae Takaichi, even battling through heavy snowfall to cast their votes. Takaichi's been in power since October, and her Liberal Democratic Party now has a supermajority in parliament. Reporter John Getty says the scale of her win puts her firmly in the driver's seat.
It's an endorsement for her fiscal plans. So one of the campaign promises she made was to suspend sales tax on food. And, that would result in a pretty large fiscal hole that investors in Japanese government bonds and in the yen got pretty spooked about, how would Japan finance this? This is basically a green light for her to push ahead with those plans, which from international perspective and from financial markets is probably one of the most significant outcomes of this result. The other interesting diplomatic outcome from this is that weeks after Takaichi came into office, she touched off one of the biggest diplomatic disputes with China that Japan has had for over a decade. She now comes out of this election with a very, very strong domestic mandate. So it will be interesting to watch now how that dynamic between Japan and China goes on going forward.
She's also surprisingly popular with younger voters who've taken note of her fashion sense.
Some of the items that she carries around, like her handbag or the pen she uses, there's been sort of a viral craze around those, and they've been sold out. And what they call in Japan this sanakatsu, this real diehard following of her, and that's been something surprising that has paid off.
Oh my.
Japan's election is set to dominate global markets this week as investors weigh what the results could mean for bonds, currencies, and overall risk appetite. That comes after a volatile stretch for tech and AI stocks. For a deeper look at how markets are reacting and where they may be heading, you can catch our sister podcast, Morning Bid, breaking down the week ahead. The link is in the show notes. Skier Lindsey Vonn has crashed out of the women's Olympic downhill just seconds into her run, with the race halted as she received medical attention. The 41-year-old, racing despite a serious knee injury, appeared to capture right full line gate before losing control and barreling off the course at high speed. She was helicoptered to a hospital in Cortina for a medical assessment. Vonn's teammate, American men's downhill skier Bryce Bennett, was watching the race with his family and friends in Bormeo's main square.
It's like when you watch downhill scenes, everyone makes it look so
chicken.
easy, and then
Yan.
something goes wrong, you see how high the risk is. So.
Vonn had been hoping to become the oldest alpine skiing Olympic medalist after winning 2 World Cup races this year.
Ooh.
Over to Washington, where there's tension inside the intelligence community. U.S. Intelligence Chief Tulsi Gabbard is rejecting claims that she tried to block Congress from accessing a whistleblower complaint. Democratic lawmakers say she slowed the process by failing to give the proper security guidance within the 21-day window required by law. But in a social media post, Gabbard says she took immediate action once she learned those instructions were needed, and she's accusing Democrats of pushing a, quote, blatant lie. The complaint, which was filed last May, alleges political interference in how classified intelligence has been shared. Gabbard says that the inspectors general under both the Trump and Biden administrations haven't found it to be credible. Reuters could not verify the contents of that original complaint.
Ooh.
Millions of people will be watching the Super Bowl tonight, and many will be keeping their eyes peeled on the ads and, of course, Bad Bunny's halftime show. To hear more about the big game and the politics around the NFL's push towards global stardom, check out our latest episode of On Assignment. The link is in the podcast description. Turning to Portugal now, where the presidential election seems set to break from the broader rise of the right across Europe. A recent poll shows moderate socialist Antonio José Seguro with a strong lead over André Ventura, the leader of the anti-establishment party Chega. Portugal's presidency doesn't hold much executive power, but the office can help mediate the country's divided political landscape. Our reporter Andre Calip in Lisbon says some of Seguro's support is coming from center-right figures who've lined up behind him.
It's unusual to say the least, but also the presidential race is a bit different from parliamentary elections, where lines are much more defined. They wouldn't support a leftist candidate in a parliamentary election, definitely, but when it comes to president's role, it's a bit easier for them to make that move.
Seguro says he wouldn't interfere in Parliament's day-to-day business. Ventura, meanwhile, is calling for what he describes as an interventionist presidency, one that would advance his anti-immigration agenda. But André says Seguro's lead doesn't necessarily mean Portugal's moving away from that agenda.
The rise of the far right is here. They are the main opposition party, and he's likely to get a bit more support at least in this election. But in this presidential election, people are going for the safer option of having an established candidate from a party that's been around for a long time. Chega was only founded in 2019, so it's been 7 years, and it went from one parliamentary deputy, who was Ventura himself, to now over 50.
Moving on to India, where the status symbol of the moment is something you might not expect: mineral water. Our correspondent Aditya Kalra went to see the trend for himself at a water tasting in New Delhi, where a sommelier guided attendees through each glass.
So the idea of the story actually came when I saw one of these Instagram posts on these tastings, right? So there was something called a blind water tasting. That word kind of stuck in my head, that what's a blind water tasting? Because all we've heard so far, at least in India, is about wine tasting. And they kind of, instead of wine, they are pouring water from Evian, from, the French water, the Italian water, the Indian spring water. And there's a mineral water called the Saratoga mineral water from New York, which is very expensive. It's $9 for a 300 ml bottle. The rich in India who can afford a $9 bottle, they are kind of demanding that water.
Most bottled or packaged water in the country costs around 20 cents. But Aditya says the growth of the luxury water industry says a lot about wealth inequality in India.
As you would know, India has a big water quality problem in the taps. The tap water that you get here, you cannot drink, as opposed to some other countries. And we are now seeing that the wealthy who are very conscious about their health, and they want the minerals, and are learning that packaged water is very different from a mineral water or a spring water, which is sourced from the Himalayas or from the French Alps. It's a tale of two Indias in some ways, right? Like, India is a country where the rich are getting richer. There is a lot of affluent class where people have the money to spend it. And then there's another India, who probably is reliant on tap water, or even has to queue up outside tankers where water supplies are not regular in even some of the major cities in the country. So for me, it's kind of an explanation of the two different Indias that are playing out in one India.
It's Sunday, and maybe you've already been out for a morning walk or are planning one with the dog. But the walk we're going to tell you about, it's nothing like yours. And it involves a very different kind of dog. On Mount Etna, researchers from ETH Zurich have sent a four-legged robot dog up the volcano to sniff out gases that can signal changes in activity. Annie Mall carries cameras, LiDAR, and a spectrometer, letting it measure sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide while navigating unstable and sandy terrain. For more on any of the stories from today, check out Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on a smart speaker, just ask for the latest news from Reuters 7 days a week. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.
That's it for your news updates. To see more stories, open Google News.